Already cash-strapped South Africans will yet again have to dig deeper into their pockets as the fuel price increases effectively from tomorrow, well, midnight actually. The adjustment fuel prices will see petrol going up by 91 cents a litre, diesel by 55 cents per litre, and illuminating paraffin will increase by 50 cents. The Department of Minerals and Energy said the adjustment is based on current local and international factors, including the Rand-US dollar exchange rate and international petroleum product prices. Now, these increases come as many South Africans and businesses are grappling with very difficult economic conditions, high food prices and high utility tariffs. To make some sense of the fuel increase, the impact that it's, of course, having on the cost of living and other economic issues that South Africans are facing right now, we're joined by Dr. Azar Jammine. He's the Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix. So good to see you, Azar. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Leanne.
So we're seeing this fuel hike coming at a very difficult time. Many businesses, especially small and medium businesses, are really trying to pick up the pieces after last month's damage from lootings, level 4 restrictions. I mean, what is now another increase going to actually do to these businesses?
Obviously, it is going to erode their ability to spend on everything else. Roughly speaking, if you work on the basis of the weights of the consumer price index, the average consumer will now have about R2.50 less for every 1,000 Rand that he's got available to spend on everything else. Now, that is not huge, but at the end of the day, it does make a difference, as you say, compounded upon an increase in food prices. A lot of this has to do, ironically, with the fact that the world economy is doing a lot better, especially your industrialized countries who have rolled out vaccines and are managing to see their economies returning to normal to some extent. And that in turn means that people are traveling more, both by car and international travel has also increased. And this has raised the demand for crude oil and caused oil prices to rise significantly over the past month.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the Rand has fallen partly because of the riots, but also because generally, internationally, emerging markets have lost some of their luster in the last month or so. The Rand has not been the only one to lose ground. The dollar has gained. And so the combination of these, it's roughly half and half, has led to higher Rand prices of fuel, and which have to be passed on to the consumer.
And this just puts us in such a difficult situation. It really does, because the price tag that was put onto just that week of looting and violence that we saw spreading through South Africa is massive. And to try and pick up the pieces from that, that just 1 week is going to set us back a very, very, very long time, not to mention the repercussions of this prolonged lockdown that we've been living in. If I look at the day, we've been in a lockdown, some form of a lockdown, for 495 days now. And, as you mentioned in your answer, the vaccine rollout, the pace of the vaccine, obviously it has picked up quite significantly with an average, I think, of around 220,000 per day is the last check I did on average. But, it's still, we're lagging behind the rest of the world. Let's do a snapshot of how long, or if, South Africa's economy can actually recover.
Ironically, Leanne, there are some good news stories behind this all that are actually likely to prevent the short-term outlook from being worse than it might otherwise have been. We were starting to see a significant recovery before the whole turmoil that we had. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that because of the very increase in demand for oil and all sorts of other commodities, including food commodities worldwide, commodity prices have risen strongly. And the average price of our metals and minerals exports and many of our agricultural exports, and the good news here is we're having a very good agricultural crop at the moment, has meant that our exports have surged by some 50% this year. And this is giving the rest of the economy a bit of a boost and helping to counterbalance many of the negative factors that we are facing. But you're so right. that until such time as we lift these lockdowns, and we are not going to see a return to some kind of normality. Ironically, one of the positives about the situation is that because people are working so much from home and not traveling around and going on holiday, this is actually conserving some of their finances to be able to cope with higher fuel prices like this.
Well, that was going to be one of my sort of comments to you. We've seen so many people working from home, obviously incurring some other costs, but I think we've seen a lot of spending from the consumer dropping quite a bit during this time. I mean, just the usual spending patterns have completely changed. I mean, have you noticed that as well? I mean, that just the consumer patterns.
Spending patterns have changed a lot. Ironically, we have seen over the past 9 months or so a big increase in the demand for furniture and household appliances to accommodate new workstations. We've seen an increase in the demand for building materials and a decline in the demand for other things. Obviously, alcoholic drinks has been one of the areas. So there has been a switch in spending patterns. On the whole, we are living in a situation where the level of spending overall is marginally down still on what it was prior to COVID, but has recovered dramatically since the worst stages of lockdown levels 4 and 5, but it still is down on what it was. Car sales, for instance, are down around between 10 and 20% compared with where they were prior to COVID, and that has to do with the fact that there's been a decline in the purchase of cars for rental purposes because so few people are renting cars, for instance. So you're having, obviously, restaurants and the services side, they're taking a huge knock, hotels, that kind of thing. But other areas, the demand is there. I would imagine so. Another demand area would be the tracksuit industry. I think everybody's suddenly now wanting to find comfort as opposed to luxury. But wait until we wake up. Then all of a sudden everyone's going to be dressing up. On to another issue, and I want to get your view on this one, is we did see that this whole issue of tapping into pensions, and this was quite an announcement that came out saying that Treasury may allow pension withdrawals before retirement under very specific circumstances. What are your views on this? Because I mean, I know it's quite a difficult one. People don't, you generally advise people not to touch their pension funds until the retirement age because that's all you have. But at the same time, we're seeing the circumstances that so many people are living in right now, desperate, and now Treasury saying they may very well touch their pension funds. What do you think of this? Well, there is a lot of pressure coming from the trade unions and the representatives of individuals to be allowed to do this to ease their financial situation. But you're quite right that it's a path to penury and poverty in the longer term for people beyond their working age. Having said that, I think the government, if you read the detail, is being fairly specific and kind of saying that pensioners will not be allowed to withdraw more than a third of their pensions for that purpose. In other words, they want to try and replicate the experience that many of you and I may be having who've got a retirement annuity fund and are allowed to withdraw up to 1/3 of that in cash and with some tax concessions at a point in time, but have to reinvest the balance 2/3 or to ensure pension for the longer term. So it's not a case of taking all the pensions and paying them out. It's a case of taking a small portion of it and letting people, giving people some relief through that 1/3 amount of their pension. Yeah. But yes, you're absolutely correct. It is a very dangerous path to be following.
Yeah. Azar, just finally as we wrap up, just prospects going forward and also looking at growth for South Africa, because obviously we're in very tough times at the moment. We do know this, but looking to 2022 with everything increasing the way it is, and the economy was already struggling before we entered into the COVID times. In 2022, there's fears of high inflation and also after what we saw happening in terms of the looting. What is your view going forward for South Africa's economy?
There are two views in this, unfortunately. The one is the negative one that you've said, that people are not going to be investing and therefore 2022 is going to be a very tough year. The other side says that given the turmoil that we've had and the crisis perception, and the fact that in many ways the radical economic transformation faction has been really denigrated. They've lost a lot of face through, there's been a lot of community support opposed to the kind of action that we saw a few weeks ago. You now have the opportunity for the government led by Cyril Ramaphosa to really start taking the bull by the horns and reforming this economy so as to reverse the longer-term declining trend. That is the very big challenge. We need to fight corruption and start embarking upon more infrastructure investment, introducing a whole lot of other structural reforms, some of which we've already done on the energy front and the privatization front. And then you go forward and you see a new world in our economy. But underlying this all, the critical thing is also what's going to happen internationally. Will this boom in commodity prices be sustained? If so, it's going to give us nice breathing space and give the government, even as we've seen the past week, a bit of space to introduce relief packages to help the poor who are really suffering at the moment.
All right, we leave it there. Azar, thanks very, very much for talking to us. That was Dr. Azar Jammine, Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix, giving us a bit of a snapshot on the economy as it is right now, and of course giving us some prospects going forward. Also, just a lot depending on the president and doing what he needs to do to lead this country. And I suppose that cabinet reshuffle could also be on the cards in terms of trying to show that leadership and moving forward as well.